Ja, det kan være litt... Men vi kan også, jeg tror du får lyden av program.
Men det hører vi bare i rommet, eller?
Ja.
For det må jeg jo høre.
Ja.
For at jeg skal vite når jeg skal begynne igjen.
Ja.
Eller du sender meg jo signal med.
Ja, men ja, du må få programlyd. Ja. Ja, jeg er litt usikker på det med leggen der, faktisk.
What the fuck? Får jeg teksten min der? Nei, det der er ikke meg.
Det er kanskje...
Det er ganske sikkert UNEA-presidentens innlegg på Major Groups Consultation.
Det hadde vært genialt da, å få all teksten min der.
Ja. Men altså, statsråden dette ble laget for han, liksom. Men jeg var ikke sikker på om dette var noe vi ville få til i det hele tatt.
Ja. Fordi det som er greia med kortene mine, at da blir jeg å se en god del ned, liksom. Men det får bare være.
Ja, det er på en måte naturlig uansett også.
Jeg vet på at ingen kunne lære seg det her manus uten at det er så mange organisasjonsnavn og excellencies og doctors og...
Det er helt nødvendig for å se ned for å si de navnene.
Ja.
Jeg synes det var en fin posisjon å ha det der, så kan du ha det bordet der, som sagt, som en sånn mellom...
Han Mohammed, som skal snakke først, han har ingen tester.
Altså her, ja.
Han bør komme på helt som vanlig. Sveinung er jo her i studio, det er jo ingenting som kan gå galt. Dette er FNs system, Inger jobber, hun er lederen av FNs miljøprogram, hun har et team på, jeg vet ikke hvor mange mennesker rundt seg som er vant på å bruke dette systemet. Så det er veldig vanskelig for meg å se for meg at de ikke skal komme på. Hvis de ikke kommer på, så spør du, så har jeg laget spørsmål som du spør til ministeren, jeg skal lage det på kort til deg. Det er bare sånn, how do you see your role as the UNEA president? Altså sånn, det er veldig bare sånn. Åpne spørsmål som han kan være blant, og det er sånn, det er ingen grunn for å tro at Inger Andersen ikke skal komme på. Hvis du ikke kommer på, så sitter du og ministeren her og snakker til vi skal være ferdig, og så går vi videre.
Men om jeg går tom for spørsmål?
Da er det hans ansvar å gjøre den tiden. Han er president av UNEA, og han er kjempepro. Det er ikke noe... Men sånn, det er ingen grunn til å tro at hun ikke skal komme på.
Men greia bare at jeg er ikke forberedt på liksom begynne å improvisere ting, ikke sant? Så om...
Men for å si sånn da stiller du han det ene spørsmålet, og så skal han snakke om det.
Ja. Skal jeg flytte den her?
Veldig gjerne. Har du lyst til å bare stelle der litt? Ja, det er mye bedre. Tusen takk. Da skal vi legge på en liten bolton her. Hvis vi lukker øynene og bare rister kanskje litt. Her.
Det er såpass...
Så er det rart du sa til. Så jeg kommer til å telle ned, ikke sant? At det er jeg som teller ned. Okay. Så jeg kommer til å si 5.
Og hva som skjer.
Ja.
For hvis den plutselig ikke er på, og jeg ikke vet noen ting.
Vi kan prøve det på første sesjon, og så ser vi om du liker det og vil fortsette med det, eller om du vil...
Technical difficulties.
Den menneskelige kontakten, du skal jo liksom takke de av, og at du kan få et litt...
Welcome to the international consultation of major groups and stakeholders at the Oslo Act for Nature Global Online Forum. My name is Ella Maria Hætta Isaksen. I am an artist and an activist, and I use both my music and my platform to talk about indigenous rights and environmental issues. My people, the Sami people, are the indigenous peoples of Norway, Finland, Sweden, and Russia. So to represent my people today, I am wearing agakti, which is the summer version of our national clothing. And I am so lucky to be your host throughout this day and take you through the program of this consultation live from our studio here in Oslo. This consultation is an opportunity for major groups and stakeholders to prepare for the 5th UN Environmental Assembly and to discuss some of the most pressing issues of our time. As we all know, we are in the midst of a devastating pandemic, and this will be the first global conversation on health and environment since the outbreak of COVID-19. Today, we will discuss the post-pandemic recovery and how to advance human development in harmony with nature. And we will have a look at the road ahead for the global work on environmental and civil society's role in this. We are honored to be joined by the president of UNIA, the Norwegian Minister for Climate and Environment, His Excellency Mr. Sveinung Rotevatn, live here today. But first, we will give the digital stage to Dr. Mohammed Abdelraouf. He is chair of the Major Groups Facilitating Committee at UN Environment, representing Science and Technology Major Group. He is on the line live from Cairo.
Thank you so much, Ella Maria. A very fine good morning to all of you. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Mr. Sveinung Rotevatn, UNIA President and Norwegian Minister of Climate and Environment. Madam Inger Anderson, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Unit Executive Director. Dear friends and colleagues from major groups from across the world, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to this virtual international consultation of major groups and stakeholders to discuss the COVID-19 post-pandemic green recovery on the road to UNIA 5, and also how to advance the human development in harmony with nature. In fact, unsustainable development patterns globally have come at the cost of our ecosystem health and the human health. Human activities have transformed the Earth's natural system and disrupted its self-regulatory mechanisms and life-supporting system. This COVID-19 crisis sent us a clear message that the solution comes only by caring for our environment and achieving our ambitious plan of 2030 agenda. Paris Agreement of climate change, biodiversity agreement, etc. Those are the best and maybe the only global roadmap for a sustainable, healthy, just future for humankind. This consultation is an important preparatory meeting leading up to the 5th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, UNIA 5, next year, with the theme Strengthening Actions for Nature to Achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and also will help to feed into the UN 75th initiative and reform process, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. I hope that this consultation can move the conservation to actions that major groups, individuals, corporates, and governments can take to safeguard the natural world and help restore the ecosystem and ecological balance. In fact, we as major groups are very committed to participate in this consultation and all next virtual and hopefully very soon face-to-face meeting on the road to UNIA 5. Major groups and stakeholders from around the world gathered today to discuss UNIA's theme and develop their input and positions, including in the light of COVID-19 pandemic, with a view to maximize the outcome of UNIA 5 and to prioritize major groups' actions and input to UNIA 5. We look forward to work with governments toward UNIA 5 in order to help post-pandemic green recovery and realizing SDGs. This consultation will help also to build the capacity and knowledge base of civil society organizations and relevant stakeholders globally, as well as enrich UNIA and CBR bureau retreats with input and expertise from non-stake actors represented by the 9 major groups and stakeholders. Thus, we have an important agenda in front of us today, focusing on issues like ocean pollution, health and environment, ecosystem restoration, road to Stockholm +50. Government must empower and engage effectively civil society in order to maintain their vital role in the public emergency response to make sure no one is left behind. Our consultation need to send a strong message to the world about the role of major groups in UNIA, in addition to the importance of UNIA itself. In order to build back sustainably, we need a coordinated and ambitious policy coupled with social, economic, and technical innovation. We need an enabling environment as well as financial incentives, removal of barriers for change. We need political, institutional, and behavioral change. But most importantly, we need an engagement of civil society groups. Major groups are critical to achieve sustainable development. Major groups can achieve the real progress on the ground on implementation, planning, evaluation, and monitoring. Dear Mr. UNIA President and UNED, kindly make sure to allocate enough budget for major groups for their effective engagement in UNIA 5 process and create better opportunities for improvement of major groups. In fact, we faced some difficulties in last UNIA 4 and in some regional consultation. Last but not least, my special thanks to Norwegian Forum for Development and Environment, our local organizer, for their great effort. Many thanks goes to the Norwegian Ministry of Climate and Environment and UNIP Civil Society Unit at UN Environment for giving us this virtual space to raise our voices, issues, and concerns about environment. I conclude by wishing you all a very successful and fruitful discussion during this consultation. Thank you so much.
Shukran Jazilian. Now I'll give the floor to the only speaker that will be joining me here in studio in Oslo, UNIA President and Norwegian Minister of Climate and Environment, His Excellency Sveinung Rotevatn.
Thank you so much, dear all. I'm honored to open this major group and stakeholders consultation. A warm welcome to each and every one of you. It's good to see that the representatives from all 9 major groups and other relevant stakeholders are participating. The key messages and priorities you identify will be vital inputs to me as President of the UN Environment Assembly and to its Bureau. Now, it may be a little strange for some of you to hear someone from the Kingdom of Norway referring to himself as President. In this context, it means chairman. And the term bureau, in turn, may also be unfamiliar to some of you. It is rather less mystical than the one from the French TV series. Put simply, it is a steering committee. The UNEA Bureau consists of ministers and high-level officials with responsibility for preparing the Assembly. When it comes to your role as stakeholders, this is very important. You are all important. You're all important voices, which we need to hear. Each group has important insights to provide, and we need continuous reality checks from your different parts of the world. Next week, there will be a meeting between the UNEA Bureau and the Committee of Ambassadors in Nairobi to discuss preparations towards the 5th United Nations Environment Assembly, UNEA 5. Preceding this, on Tuesday, there is a dedicated meeting with some of you to make sure we receive your inputs. Now, I was originally looking very much forward to welcoming you here in Oslo, but this year has certainly not turned out exactly as planned. It is still hard to fully comprehend the effects of the pandemic. Please take care and do what you can do to stay safe wherever you are. On a happier note, I am glad that we can still meet online on this online platform. Your voices are still important. It may not be a perfect format, considering time zones and varying connections and qualities around the world, but on the upside, more people are now able to participate than would have been the case at a physical meeting here at Oslo. I am confident that you will have a useful and productive meeting. Now, as you know, the theme for UNEA 5 is strengthening actions for nature to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And our original goal remains unchanged. We still need to take transformative actions for nature. It now looks like UNEA 5 will be a first meeting as the UN and global community embarks on the road to our post-pandemic world. That is a big responsibility. We must still work to ensure no one is left behind and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. The pandemic has made us even more aware that we must work together if we are going to respond effectively to the climate crisis and nature crisis. The Environment Assembly gives us a platform for just that, to share experiences and good ideas, motivate and challenge each other, and send a clear call to action. I will do my best to ensure that UNEA 5 delivers a strong message to the world. One of the key responsibilities I have as UNEA president is the Ministerial Declaration. Thank you to everyone who sent their inputs recently. Your contributions are valuable. Several transformative areas for action have been highlighted in the inputs from member states and from stakeholders. One of the highlighted areas is the need for a green recovery that puts us on track towards the Sustainable Development Goals and places people and nature at the heart of decision-making. Another important focus is the connection between healthy ecosystems and healthy people, and the need for holistic approaches to protect and restore nature and ecosystem services. Moreover, we need to work with nature to a much greater extent when it comes to the production and consumption of food, to achieve sustainable food systems that safeguard the environment while combating hunger and malnutrition. The Act for Nature Forum has these issues and more on the agenda. The thematic town halls will take us through a range of issues, including green recovery, healthy ecosystems, sustainable food systems, and the threat of marine littering to life in the sea. And as you know, the Major Group for Children and Youth will host their own town hall on Wednesday, which will undoubtedly be excellent, judging from my experience attending their virtual youth assembly on Friday. So I hope you will all join several of these town halls and be involved and engaged and making good use of the interactive elements. I'm looking forward to listening to your inputs on Tuesday. Until then, I wish you good discussions. Thank you.
Tusen takk. The final opening remarks will be given by Her Excellency Inger Andersen, Undersecretary General of the UN and Executive Director of the UN Environmental Programme. Live with us now from Denmark.
Oh, thank you very much. And I'm no excellency. I'm just trying to do the best that I can by the environment. And let me thank you, Ella Maria Isaksen, for being such a wonderful host. And of course, Mohammed Abdarrouf as the leader and the chair of major groups. And of course, Minister Rotterdam for his inspirational opening just now. To everyone that is participating, thank you and 1,000 thanks. We did not know how we would be able to pull this off, and I do thank very much also the Norwegian Forum for Development and Environment who has facilitated this, and everyone who is present today. We will not be stopped as the environment movement, as your UNEP. We need to hear your voices. You form an important pillar of our engagement. And what I've been saying throughout, even though we've seen some improvements, temporary as we've locked up the world in our air quality, in our emissions, etc., these are temporary. And what we need to do is to think about how this crisis becomes, in spite of the big tragedy, an opportunity for really restarting green. And UNIA becomes an important platform, as we just heard from Minister, for just that. And we only have one roadmap to recovery. It's called our environmental agreements. It's called UNIA. It's called the SDGs. It's called the Paris Agreement. And it is called the COP15 that we shall have next at some point once we fix the time. Now, climate change hasn't stopped while we've been in this crisis. Environmental degradation has not stopped. Pollution and waste has not stopped. But we have sought and learned something. While we have been sitting in our apartments, we have longed for what? We've longed for nature. We've longed for the freedom to go out. We've longed for being involved with and engaged with nature. And the first thing that people did after they were allowed to leave their apartments in places where they have been allowed was indeed to seek out nature, because we and environment are intricately linked. And that is why I am so proud to have this group of engaged citizens, engaged stakeholders with us today. You will help us make that much more critical. In UNEP, how are we seeking to respond to COVID-19? We speak about 3+1. The three first elements deal with, first of all, number one, the immediate medical crisis. We are not the medical people, but we've seen massive amount of waste here with the Basel Convention, as well as Rotterdam and Stockholm. We've engaged and are engaging with countries in supporting them on these increased waste streams. Two, clearly nature. We know that this disease is zoonotic in nature, i.e. that it originates in the animal world. We need to understand how we have been pushing nature into a corner, how we have been trading illegally, how we have been not giving nature a chance to establish its biodiversity and its balance. So working on nature. Three, clearly, as Minister said, build back better, build back greener, flick the green switch, and ensure that as we do so, we take these opportunities. We're going to have huge stimulus packages roll off during the next 10 to 12 to 24 months across the world. Let us not use these to just rebuild and go back to where we were. Rather, let us use these precisely as we've seen some countries do, setting conditions on them, that the companies or the municipalities or whoever receive these monies, that they use them to go green. And when it's job creation, let's think about job creation that will do green. In Pakistan, for example, it's about planting trees. And it will put money in people's pockets, but also trees out. So we can really think about building back better, building back greener. These are the three. The fourth is we want to learn how we as environmentalists, we as UNEP, we have the privilege of hosting 15 conventions. How can we use these platforms smartly, not by locking up the world? How can we use the e-platforms that we are now using to minimize our footprint? Are there ways that we can be more efficient and not necessarily always traveling around the world? We as environmentalists need to set that first foot forward for environmental multilateralism. 3+1 is what we're talking about here. And so what I want to say to everyone here today, that stakeholders, your involvement is important, as more important than ever. You are the watchdog. You hold up the mirror for us to see ourselves and be mindful and tell us about elements that we need to be careful of. We are so proud to have more than 600 NGOs accredited and part of the UN family and the UNEP family, youth groups, businesses, academic groups, indigenous peoples, NGOs, etc. And we are in this together. UNEP is only as good as its stakeholders and as its member states, as the science we bring. So please engage with us and help us make UNEA 5 a success. Minister has outlined the imperative of a UNEA that will be strong and that will tell the world what the future can look like if we do it right. And if we have learned anything from COVID, if we have learned anything from climate change, it is that together we can make a difference. Yesterday was World Environment Day, Friday, and we said for nature, time for nature. It's time for this one planet that we have. Let's make it happen together. I will be listening very much to what you have to say. I thank you for your engagement and look forward to continue to engage with you as we move forward. Thank you so very much.
Tusen tack. This concludes the opening session, and we are now ready to move on to our very first panel of the day, Tackling Ocean Pollution. The first panel will be followed by a breakout session where the participants will continue the discussions in groups. But first, we will just take a few minutes break before our first panel. So. One of the major issues facing the world today is ocean plastic. Around 359 million tons of plastic was manufactured globally in 2018. And some studies suggest as much as 10% of it ends up in the sea each year. Our first session will focus on ocean pollution. We are closer than ever before seeing an international ban on plastic pollution. And we ask our panel of experts the question, how can an international agreement to stop plastic pollution be inclusive and efficient? Our first speaker is Jayne Patton, who is a senior campaigner with the Center of International Environmental Law. She has been working with communities to address inequality, mitigate harm, and increase justice. Global policy on the full life cycle of plastics is a central part of her work. Jayne is joining us live from the US. The stage is yours.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I believe I have some slides that you'll be able to see. Are the slides, there we go. So I've already been given an introduction, so I'll just go ahead and move right into the content of where we are. So what I am speaking to this morning is about how members of different major groups have been able to come together to align our work in pursuit of a common goal. And that goal is around a new treaty for plastics and a new conversation about how we solve the worldwide problem of plastic pollution. If we could move to the next slide. We are organizations from more than 30 countries. Some of us are actually networks that also support many dozens of organizations from even more countries. So we have a very international character to the work that we are bringing to the table through the United Nations Environment Assembly and the expert group process on marine litter and microplastics. And this is a key part of how we're able to do our work. Each of us has a different perspective from our respective countries about how plastic pollution affects us, about some of the policies that we've undertaken nationally and regionally to solve the problem. And this has been a key part of our effort. Next slide. And what we are specifically working for is toward the existing expert group process on marine litter and microplastics. We are actually looking to expand the conversation to the full life cycle of plastics so that we're not only talking about plastic in the ocean, but we're actually talking about the social and environmental and human and environmental health problems that are caused by plastics throughout its life cycle, in addition to the serious climate risk that plastic poses throughout all of the ways that we make and use and manage it as waste. We've been in this expert group process now for 2 years. We've evaluated so much of the research, all of the information that's available. And at this point, it's time for us to really start talking about policy solutions. So we're also working to move toward a working group and a conversation about real policy solutions coming out of UNEA 5, which, as mentioned previously, will hopefully be our next in-person meeting. We're also looking for that new policy platform to be legally binding so that countries and people around the world really have to make a change in their lives and their business models in the way that we do this work and in the way that we live, make, and interact with plastic. And of course, we are moving toward a global resolution. And again, making sure that there are new systems and new laws around the world to ensure that plastic never has the opportunity to become pollution at any point in its life cycle. Next slide. And our group engages in a number of ways. We coordinate together in participation at all of the global meetings, both through the Environment Assembly Expert Program, through the Environment Assembly Expert Program, also through the Basel Convention and other conventions that end up being relevant to plastic pollution. We provide expert input into these policy meetings and processes. We advise delegates, we gather support, and we work to enrich both our positions and countries' positions. We work to influence key people, both at home in our countries and at these global meetings. So we're working on two fronts. And we also are working to align local, national, and regional policy objectives with those at the global level. And finally, of course, we share information with our networks. We issue newsletters, we make our supporting positions public, and we hold direct engagement events. We do capacity building and stakeholder engagement and education. These are all key parts of the work that we do together, not just individually as organizations. Next slide. And these are just some of the resources that we use. We obviously prepare joint position statements. We also put out a newsletter on our work that is usually issued during global meetings. We have a number of expert reports on the health impacts of plastic throughout its life cycle, the climate impacts of plastic. We, of course, have a guide on ocean pollutants, and a guide on how plastic affects communities on the front line. Each of these is put out by different organizations within our network, and we use all of them, in addition to some compelling visuals. Next slide. And this is where that work has gotten us. This is a visual of all of the regions around the world that have made reference to the need for new global policy in regional declarations, in national declarations to address plastic pollution. And this has really been coming together over the last 2 years. Next slide. We've also worked together. I'm not going to go into detail here because Eric is going to talk about this in his portion, but we've worked together to come up with an idea of what a new international agreement could look like. And this is also something that we provide expert advice on in the global meetings. Next slide. And the reason we do this work is because plastic pollution is not just a marine litter problem, and that's an important part of the story.
Thank you. Second, we have Eirik Lindebjerg. Eirik is the Global Plastic Policy Manager at World Wildlife Foundation and is central in the growing global movement advocating for an international ban on plastic pollution. Now I give the screen to him. Take it away, Eirik.
Thank you so much, Ella. It's a great pleasure being here with you today. As Jayne mentioned, the environmental movement, the youth movement are demanding action and demanding real change from UNEA 5. I think that's very much to the core of our demands all over the different topics that will come up at UNEA. We need UNEA to create the necessary binding rules at the global level, and I think a large part of the environmental movement have also got tired in a way of empty voluntary commitments that have unfortunately been the norm in many global conferences and meetings. But UNEA has a special role and a special position and can actually create and start the work to create new global rules for global environmental problems. And plastic pollution is one of them, and maybe the one where UNEA can completely change the picture from where we are today. Currently, we don't really have any working global framework to address plastic pollution. We don't have the rules in place. We don't even have the proper measurement. We don't even know. We have some estimates of how much plastic pollution comes into the ocean every year, but it's only estimates. We don't have a reporting system, nothing at all like that. So if you compare it to many other global environmental problems, plastic pollution, the governance of plastic pollution is in a really bad state at the global level at the moment. But UNEA 5 can change that. And as Jayne mentioned, we can see the start of a new global agreement that can address plastic pollution at the global level. It's not completely rocket science, you know. We've done it before. We've seen some global international agreements that have solved big environmental problems before. I think the Montreal Protocol is the best example of what was a really big success for a global mobilization for a new binding framework. And that's what we're seeing again happening now on plastic pollution. A new agreement we can learn from the past, and we can see what has previous agreements had that we need to copy in the new plastic pollution agreement. And then there's a lot of interesting work we'll have to do to see what are the specificities of the problem that we need to have specific mechanisms for. Some things are common though, I think. We need concrete binding targets. We need a goal of zero plastic pollution, zero leakage of plastic into the environment at the global level. And we need national goals that adds up in the long run to reach that overarching target. We need reporting and measuring, as I mentioned. We need to have an overview of how progress is being made in all countries on this. And we need a scientific body, like we have on many other issues. The IPCC on climate is the most famous, but it's actually a quite common institution to put in place to make sure that we base our international decisions on proper science, and that we have an overview of the science that is being created. Then we need the proper rules and procedures in place. We need a harmonization of lots of the different regulations that are being discussed and put out there. We need minimum standards across the field, both on when it comes to practices, on how we deal with plastic, how we deal with plastic waste as well, for example. And we need standards on the products to make sure that we create a circular economy on plastics and that we aren't creating products that are impossible to deal with and that are designed for ending up in nature. In a way, also, such international standards will create, I think, stimulate innovation and create new business opportunity, and importantly, create a level playing field also for the industry. Then a new global agreement also must include a support mechanism. It's important that such international goals and targets are being implemented in all countries on the globe, also countries with limited financial resources. So a global fund and a financial support mechanism will be crucial and will be a big priority for many countries to ensure that they have the support in place in order to meet these goals and targets. And finally, I think a new global agreement, it's not just one piece of paper that is out there once and signed and then it's forgotten. Actually, these global conventions tend to create a decision-making platform that is living and continuously developing as we get new information of the problem, and new protocols and decisions can be added as we go along. But for all of this to happen, UNEA 5 has a crucial role. UNEA 5 must adopt a negotiation mandate for a new global agreement on plastic pollution. Thank you.
Tusen takk. The last speaker in this session is Amayo Pasi Ogola, who is a program officer for Sustainable Energy Futures at the Society for International Development. Amayo raises awareness on plastic waste and works with organizations based in Nairobi's informal settlements to organize clean-up matches. She will be joining us live from Nairobi, Kenya.
Thank you, Ella, Maria, and greetings to you all from the beautiful Ngong Hills. I hope you can hear me. Okay, can you hear me? Great, so thank you, Ella Maria, and greetings to you all from the beautiful Ngong Hills. I continue to derive great joy in working together with local organizations and youth movements in Nairobi's informal settlements to ensure that their environments are free from plastic waste, and while also raising much needed awareness against the proliferation of plastic waste. Taking initiative against plastic waste at a personal and community level is the first step to ensuring ownership and meaningful participation in an agreement or treaty against plastic waste. More broadly, recognizing the role of all stakeholders in stopping plastic pollution and ensuring an all-inclusive engagement of all parties is important. The agreement must be both top-down and bottom-up. Top-down means involving an elite coalition between states and businesses, and bottom-up means the agreement must involve the action by a wider mobilization among civil society, grassroots entrepreneurs, all who work for the benefit of the public. Consequently, partnerships and alliances are crucial in ensuring ownership, commitment, and the exchange of best practices if a successful agreement to stop plastic pollution is assured. It is also important to engage all stakeholders as equal partners. That will be the basis for genuine ownership of the agreement process. Every phase of the agreement process should consider sufficient consultation of all stakeholders and major groups, with their feedback also taken into consideration, not forgetting the involvement of coastal communities who are directly affected by marine waste or litter. The agreement must bring together the collective effort of all parties, major groups, and stakeholders. More important is that the private sector plays a huge role in the production of disposable plastics. It is therefore very, very important that their commitment in stopping plastic waste is factored in for the common good of all people. Formations of private sector coalitions against plastic pollution can be a successful approach from the very beginning of an agreement process. If the private sector are part of the agreement from the beginning, it is easy to follow through and to hold various brands accountable for plastic waste pollution in the oceans and in the wider environment. Also, ownership of the agreement will be strengthened if parties signing up to the agreement are guided by a rule book on implementation. Without some form of guide or rules for implementation, it will be difficult for parties to take ownership or even show some responsibility towards the agreement to stop plastic pollution. A good example is the Paris Agreement in the Climate Change Convention. Parties are still working to agree on one rule book that will make implementation owned at national level and trackable. Another point is to accelerate ownership and meaningful participation in an agreement. The UNEA 5 presidency could also consider appointing high-level champions against plastic waste, and also for the different themes of the UNEA annually. The champions could then initiate goals for implementation in the appointed themes and regions. Capacity building, education, and awareness is extremely important. The agreement should have a component for capacity building, awareness, and education across the various major groups and stakeholders. This in the long run cultivates a behavioral change, which is much greatly needed when it comes to production, consumption, and management of disposable plastics. Finally, this could follow the HLPF or the ECOSOC review models. This to mean that if an agreement is finally reached, a periodic review mechanism will need to be taken into place. And that is why I reference the HLBF or ECOSOC review models that engage all stakeholders, especially civil society organizations, to evaluate member states, private sector, and major groups' implementation of relevant commitments or roles in the treaty over a period of time. This could be yearly or biannually. It will help build ownership across all levels of engagement as stakeholders strive to have concrete outcomes or efforts to report at each review session. Finally, never has it ever been more urgent to act for nature. The proliferation of plastic pollution is a danger to both human and marine life. Thank you.
Asante. To round off this session, I'll give the screen to each panelist for some brief final remarks. So Jayne, if you would like to start, then the two others will follow directly.
I hear both panelists so much that UNEA 5 has a crucial role to play in ensuring that we do get a global agreement on plastics, and ensuring that that agreement includes really key standards for design, that it's a living platform, as Eric said, and that it's both a top-down and bottom-up resolution and a policy framework. So many of our communities across the world have existing functional zero waste models for how to remove the need for plastic packaging, for plastic waste, from the way that community systems work, how we get food and water, but also how we manage and collect plastic waste. I think communities have great models that need to be incorporated into a policy structure. And I think, as both other panelists have said, the industry that makes plastics will play a key role in making sure that the agreement both fits the needs of communities, but also that it limits production. I think it's very clear from the conversations that we've been having in the expert group that that has to be one of the key elements of a treaty, is that we are looking at production reduction, and we are looking at the limits on how we use plastics, especially in a single-use environment. So I'm very optimistic and positive about how major groups and civil society are coming together through the UN process to get that mandate that we need out of UNEA 5, and to ensure that the expert group wraps up its work in the next year or in the next few months with some clear options and recommendations toward UNEA 5 for how we move that work forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayne, and thank you, Amayo, for some really great insights as well. I think I can sign up to a lot of what you're saying, and to build on Jayne's point on and Amayo's point on getting the industry as well on board. I think it is important to note that we are not doing this to stop job creation or to limit business opportunities. It's actually to build a proper, sustainable and circular economy for plastics. And I think, to a large extent, as we've seen with many other environmental problems before, when you get global rules and standards in place, it actually creates a much better enabling environment for sustainable business to thrive, instead of, like it is today, a very fragmented and very difficult regulatory environment also to work in. To Amayo's point on inclusion, I think you have really many good lessons learned there that we should draw into this process as well. And I think today the international approach is so fragmented that it's difficult for civil society to engage, because where is the big decision-making authority globally on plastics? That's why we need a global agreement that will also have the COPs and big level decision-making forums where civil society also must be included and can be engaged.
Thank you so much to Jayne and Eric. I totally agree with the sentiments that you have both raised, and it is my hope that we will be able to, in the long run, have a globally agreed upon agreement that will tackle plastic pollution once and for all. I mean, according to data out there, it seems like one person a day accounts for about 1 metric ton of plastic per day, which is why we must also consider taking initiative at personal and community levels feel like groups and local communities also have a role to play when it comes to managing plastic waste from a consumption basis. But then also, it also calls to the private sector to begin to take initiatives. I mean, I can cite the example from SC Johnson, who have recently partnered with the Plastic Bank, creating a coalition that is committed to finding innovative ways of ending plastic waste and poverty by incentivizing plastic waste collection. With such push and drive and commitment from production, consumption, and then bringing together policy actors to be able to enforce an agreement, I think we can reach a long traction. And major groups and stakeholders, we have a role to play in raising awareness locally, bringing on board groups that usually do not have the space or the capacity to engage in some of these high-level decision-making forums. So I commend you all, and I look forward to working together with you all. I look forward to UNEA 5 and to a great impact that UNEA 5 will have on addressing plastic waste now and in the future. Thank you. See you all.
Thank you all very much, Orinsami Olugito. What a great introduction to the breakout sessions on tackling ocean pollution. You have all been assigned a breakout session, and you will find it here on the platform if you are a logged in participant. And if you face any technical issues, please just press the assistance button and you will get some help.